Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Lori and Tall Paul Show. I'm Lori Heinzelman, career and leadership coach, and I'm joined by my co-host, Paul Olson.
Hello, everyone.
So we are actually recording on Veterans Day. So happy Veterans Day to anybody who will be listening afterwards, because this isn't live. But happy Veterans Day. And because we're recording on Veterans Day, I suggested we talk a little bit about military to civilian career transitions on today's podcast. And maybe that'll enlighten some people who don't have a military background or a lot of exposure to it. And maybe it'll help some people who are currently going through that transition. So let's get
And
started.
happy Veterans Day to you, Lori.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
tell us, how did you serve?
So I was in the Air Force, and oh, this brings up so many memories, Paul, and I think we might have touched on it in one of our podcasts. But my intent, because I am a military brat, Air Force brat, was to serve at least 20 years, retire from the Air Force, reach or exceed, definitely exceed my father's rank, and make a career of it. And that didn't happen. And that was a career transition we'll likely talk about today. But I served for 4 years, and I was in Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado Springs. Cheyenne Mountain was the name of the Air Force base at the time. And I think it has since been renamed to like the space, some sort of space mountain. Like it's not an Air Force base anymore. I think it actually supports the Space Force, the new Space Force that
Oh, okay.
exists, that Trump created. So that's
Okay.
sort of interesting. But yeah, I actually worked inside Cheyenne Mountain as a computer operator in Colorado Springs at the time.
You worked inside of it?
Yes, I worked inside a mountain.
Okay.
So
Is there covered parking in there?
no, actually,
What?
no. And it's funny because in the military, and we'll likely talk more about this too, in the military, everything is very time sensitive. You are expected to be on time for your shift, and that means before it starts. So if your morning shift is 7 to 3, you are there at 6:58 or 6:55. You're earlier so that you can do the shift exchange. There's a
Okay.
turnover, a shift
Hmm.
transition. So you are there finding out what happened the shift before because at Cheyenne Mountain, at least, it was a 24/7 shop. So it was always manned. Someone was always there.
Okay.
So something to be mindful of in the military, many people work Saturday and Sunday and 11
Hmm.
o'clock at night and whatever. So um, you had to be inside the mountain. And I cannot tell you how far in I actually had to go inside the mountain, but I can tell you that it was probably, I had to take a bus inside. So
Okay.
our parking was outside of the
Okay.
installation. So there was a parking lot. You actually drove up alongside the mountain for miles to get to the base, which is scary for someone like me who's afraid of the heights and thinks you're going to fall off the side of the mountain. You actually went around in circles up this mountain and you parked outside. And at the time, we took a bus inside. So you went through security, and there was a bus waiting for you. You could walk, but it was quite a distance. I want to say it was at least half a mile to a mile. And so most people elected to take the bus inside at least to work
Okay.
and then maybe walk out later on if they wanted some exercise. So you would take the bus inside, you'd get dropped off. And then from there, you would walk inside the mountain and you could actually, even driving in, you can see the sides of the mountain.
Wow, that's
I have
awesome.
to tell, yeah, at the time, I didn't appreciate the magnitude of it
Uh-huh.
until I tell the story. And you could see the mountain. And when you are walking down this hallway that they've created, like it's not even a real hallway, like a raised floor kind of thing with rails on the side, it's the mountain that is on the side of you that you're walking down until you find your shop that is tough to locate when you're new because they all look the same. They're just these steel doors because they're
Okay.
vaults, right? They're vaulted.
Really?
Yes, they're vaulted doors. So
Wow.
they're, and you have to have a code. And even the main entrance, a lot of people have brought this up, and I have not gone back to check. War Games is based on this. So NORAD in that
Uh-huh.
movie War Games,
Hmm.
NORAD is actually inside of Cheyenne Mountain, or at least it used to be when I
Okay.
was in 94 to 98, a long time ago. And the command center, I actually had an opportunity to see that or walk in there, which is kind of cool because I had a top secret clearance. That's the other
Oh,
thing. They do a
wow.
very thorough background check on people in the military, and I had a top secret clearance. So just as I think about the experience and trying to like help you see it, really, it's actual wall, like the mountain wall. Sometimes you could see ice stripping as you're
Okay.
walking through. Now your shop was secure and had wall paneling. So it
Okay.
wasn't the wall inside the actual shop where you worked. But when you walked to and from different shops or to the cafeteria or even to the gym that was there at the time, it was a mountain and it
Wow,
was
that's crazy.
cold.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yeah.
And so how big was this whole facility roughly?
Oh my gosh. I can't even guess. I mean, I can't even guess.
Bigger than a Costco?
Yes, I would say definitely
Wow.
bigger than a
Oh my
Costco. And
gosh.
I would say it's tough to really know like on a grand scale because it was really a bunch of hallways
Okay.
and you just navigated and it all looked the same based on where you were going. So there were many shops in there. There was one main command center. Like I said, we had our chow hall and our gym, and there's likely things that have changed since I've been there. But one thing that I remember is we had an exercise one day when I think I was coming off of work, I was coming off my shift. And so when an exercise starts, you are going through it like it's a real life scenario. That's the purpose of an exercise, right? And depending on the code alert, you go through certain things. And the security forces had to close the main door into the tunnel that we walked through for work. And they closed this door. And this was the first time I paid attention because that door has always been open that I never even
Huh?
thought twice, right? I just always walked by it. There would be a security guy, two security guys kind of standing there. And they closed that door, and I couldn't get over how tall it was. It must have been like height, like you're super tall, right? 6'5". I would say it was probably five of you at least on top, standing on top.
Wow.
And the height of this door and how thick it was,
Mm-hmm.
it must have been like for them to try to push this door to see how heavy this door was. It was enormous. It was a massive. And they shut it
Wow.
and then locked it, right? Like vaulted it. Like it
Mm-hmm.
was like a huge safe. I just the magnitude of what you experience when you're in the military sometimes doesn't hit you until you're out or until you're talking to somebody about that experience,
Yeah.
like I am now.
Uh-huh.
Just
Wow.
like,
Okay. All that is like, that's awesome. I want to rewind real quick. This was the Air Force, right?
yes,
So you are afraid of heights and you went into the Air Force.
I'm afraid of heights, and at the time I was afraid of flying.
What? And then how did
Yes,
that work?
yes,
How'd you end up in the Air Force
I
then?
was afraid of flying. Okay, so for anybody who may listen to this even down the road, I ended up in the Air Force because my father was in the Air Force, for one. So I was used to that. And based on what we play around in the service, you had to get a certain score to be in the Air Force. And quite honestly, I wanted to be in the Air Force. A lot of people want to be in the Air Force, but the ASVAB scoring, the series of tests that they have you take, you have to obtain a certain score in order to make it in. So being in the Air Force is almost seen like a high honor because
Okay.
not everybody can get in. Not
Hmm.
everybody can achieve the score that's necessary to make it. And honestly, I've known several people that have tried specifically to get into the Air Force because it requires the highest scoring and they can't. So
Mm.
maybe a little bit of it had to do with that, like knowing, hey, I could do this, right? I was one of the few people that could get that score, but a lot of it was because of my father, because my father was in the Air Force. I saw him, and I mean, it made sense. If I'm going to join the military, I'm going to follow my father's footsteps.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
And I didn't want to
So,
go to college. I'll be honest. I was done. I was done with high school. I was bullied. I didn't want to go to college. So I was like, I'm going to join the service that I know. And so,
okay.
yes, I was not a pilot. I'm afraid of
Okay.
planes, but I still managed to support the Air Force despite that.
If you had been a pilot, what would your call sign have been?
Oh, oh my gosh, that is crazy. Probably something like Dragon Lady.
Okay, cool. That's a great name. Dragon Lady. Did you have a good relationship with your father? Can I ask you that on the show or no?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
And I know I'm
I,
totally hitting you with just so the audience knows,
yeah.
I'm totally hitting Lori with that question by surprise. And
So,
so I don't know if you don't want to answer it, that's cool. But what the reason why I'm asking is because it sounds like you really wanted to get in because your dad was in. And I'm just wondering, was that because you had a bad relationship with your dad and your dad said you never amount to anything, and so you're going to prove to him that you could be the same as him? Or was it just you admired your dad so much, you had such a great relationship, you didn't want to let him down, so you wanted to make sure you got into the Air Force or something in between?
I would say something in between. And that's a interesting question because I've actually been thinking about it a lot. Because even
Mhm.
on my website, I had written a little bit about my story and it talks about following in my father's footsteps. And those words just naturally came out. And so my
Mhm.
father and I wouldn't say we were particularly close. Like we came from a family where there wasn't a lot of, you didn't show emotions, you didn't display emotions. You knew people were proud of you because, they didn't think they had to say it all the time, but you knew people were proud of you. And I did pretty well. I got decent grades, right? I was good at sports. Like I excelled, I would say, right? I mean, there were things that I did that were wrong, that I was bad, like as a kid, right? But I would say I respected my dad. And maybe admire is the word, and I just don't realize that. But I respected my dad because we came from what I would consider a traditional military family because we moved so often. We moved less than every 2 years. So I moved very often and I
Wow.
hated it as a
Hmm.
kid, a lot. But my dad did a lot for us. My mom stayed home and took care of us, which I think a lot of military spouses do because they're constantly moving. It's very
Right.
hard to keep a job when you're
Hmm.
constantly moving because your family is your first priority.
Hmm.
Um, but my dad always made sure the transition happened successfully when we got to the base. He always got us enrolled in school, got us signed up in programs. And I think I just watched my father advance in rank, one, and I could see that as series of awards that he would get, right, for Sergeant of the Month or whatever.
Hmm.
And one of the things that my dad did towards the end of his career that I really liked was he held the position of first sergeant. And the position of first sergeant in the Air Force is someone who sort of takes care of the squadron. That's the person that's like the people person, and he
Okay.
takes care of really the people's needs. So if somebody's in trouble, if someone's having financial problems, if they're having marital problems, even the people that get drunk and get thrown in prison, the first sergeant is the one that they call to come get them. So sort of like a counselor, and maybe similar to what I'm doing now, right, with the coaching.
Okay.
That was the person that really cared for the people. And
Hmm.
that's still who that person is. Someone who it's a coveted role. Not many people can be a first sergeant, so you have to obtain a certain rank, but then you also have to go to school to be a first sergeant. I guess they sort of teach you how to care for people maybe and what those leadership skills are. So I really enjoyed watching my dad in that role in particular because I could tell he really took care of people. People would come to him and he was well known and
Okay.
respected. I could tell people really liked him. So,
Huh. That's pretty cool. That's
yeah, that's a good
I didn't
question.
I didn't realize there was that kind of like a role was that specific. Like you're the house mom or you're the house dad. You know, you're
Yeah. And you could look at it like that, right? Except it was for the entire squadron. And I'm trying to
hmm
think like what that would be. It was like for the entire company,
hmm
an entire company. So at your college, it would be someone who took care of the entire community college, or at Bosch, where I used to work, it would be someone who was the director or VP or of the whole company. And that would be the person that ran the program or took care of the people. And something funny, like a funny story, is in the Air Force, they call first sergeant, they call them shirt. I
Okay.
wish I knew why, but they call them shirt. Hey, shirt, what's up, shirt? Ask the shirt. And when I remember when I was a little kid and my dad had just become a first sergeant, my dad used to play softball on the Air Force team. And I went to watch them play, and everybody had their name on the back of their shirt. And my dad's shirt said shirt. And I was like, why does his shirt say shirt? Like everybody knows it's a shirt. Like I had no idea that's what you called the first sergeant. That was kind of so you would probably see the same thing. If you see someone walking around and their shirt says shirt,
Uh-huh.
it's not, hey, this is a shirt, the way you see some people label their trucks, right? Ford is a Ford or whatever. It's a nickname.
Sure. Well, oh, so I wonder if anybody listening will know why that person is called shirt, and then maybe they'll put it in the comments.
Yes, I got to open up the comments too. That's another reminder to us. People keep asking for me to open up the comments
Oh, right, right. Uh-huh.
because they
Yeah,
want to leave comments. So
yeah.
I got to make a note to do that. But you know who will know the answer? My husband for sure. He's in the
Okay.
Air Force, but he'll just know
Well,
the
he'll know.
answer
Yeah.
because he
He'll
knows
know.
that
Is
kind
your
of.
dad still alive?
Yes, yes. In fact, I told my dad Happy Veterans Day today.
Yeah, well, happy Veterans Day to
Thank you.
Mr. Heinzelman.
Worthington.
Worthington. Mr.
Yes,
Worthington.
yes, Worthington. That's
Awesome.
my maiden name. So yes, I will let him know.
Okay, so there are a bunch of questions about military transitions that we want to get to.
Yep.
Did you want to introduce that any further before we start asking those questions?
I can talk a little about, yeah, I'll talk a little bit about it. Um, it's funny because when I was going through my own transition, it was tough for me. It was an overload of information that was just sort of thrown at you in a half day course. I don't even know if it was half day, quite honestly. And then it was just all this paperwork that you took away that you had to sift through later to make sense of it all. That was my takeaway. And a lot of people that I'm meeting now tell me the same thing, even though I'm hearing it's improved. Maybe it's a little bit longer. I think it might be broken up into a couple days. And it certainly depends on what service you're in too, I believe. Right. But a lot of information is thrown at you at once, and it's a lot to digest and take in. And when I was getting out, I know I didn't have the help. And that can be for many reasons, and we'll talk about that later when we get there. But I'm starting to get into that space again. When I retired and got into coaching, I was looking to do career coaching. In particular, I wanted to coach early to mid careers to help people with their leadership skills and then just transitioning and moving back to a military friendly area in Virginia, in the Hampton Roads area. I've suddenly met a lot of people who were encountering this problem and transitioning. And I met them because I had signed up for a couple mentoring programs to mentor. I was like, hey, I can do that. I was in the service. I'm a military brat. I know a lot about this. My father was in, right? I can help them. And I'm a military spouse. So that's what's very unique about me is that I'm a spouse, a veteran, and a brat. So I'm a
Yeah,
military brat.
wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I moved here and started to recognize that there was a need for some coaching on that transition from military to civilian. People are very unsure of what that looks like and where to start. I wanted to start exploring how I could help military service members feel better about the transition to civilian careers and also individually, not at a grand scale, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I don't come from a military family, was not in the military. So help me understand this. So you were living regular civilian life. Maybe you had, some jobs or whatever before you went in. I'm sure you were young, right? Were you like 19 or what, something like that?
I joined the military when I was 18 years old.
Okay.
So a little
So maybe
after,
part-time jobs or something like that. But you knew how the world worked in terms of, people get jobs, right?
yes.
And that's generally how they make their living. So then you're in the military for 4 years. So why is it so difficult? If you before you go in, you understand that people get jobs and they live, that's how they pay their bills and everything. Why is it so difficult to make a transition back out of the military? Because when you're in the military, you get some kind of job, right? So what makes it so difficult to transition out?
That's a very loaded question. Very loaded. And I actually wrote down a little bit like scenarios, things to consider, because the reason it's difficult is it because there isn't just one answer. It's very individualized and it depends on many factors. It depends on the service that you are in. It depends on the area that you get out in. Is it military friendly? Is there no military background? Like when I lived in Metro Detroit, there's a very small military population, so they're not heavily informed on military skill sets. Um, Depends on your own unique situation. Do you have a family? Are you a single service member? Are you divorced? Do you have children? There are a lot of things that you have to consider when you get out, not just a job. So it isn't just the job transition that has to happen. It's also the identity transition, if you will, who you are as a person, because your life as a military service member is so much different as a civilian. Um, it just the camaraderie, it's just it's unlike anything I can really explain because you build connections so quickly because you're constantly moving, you're always new, whether you're a kid or somebody who serves in the military. And so it's just a lot of pieces that have to change. It isn't just one thing. It isn't just you, the individual. It's the people around you who you're surrounding yourself with now. And it's also having to learn to navigate a world that functions differently. And what I mean by that is the military is very command and control. It's very time, very on time, right? Shifts start at this time, shifts end at this time, things have to happen at this time. The civilian world isn't necessarily like that. It depends on the sector. Definitely, it depends on the sector. Um, the expectation is that you're going to do the job. So when your commanding officer or your direct supervisor gives you a task, you do it. There's
Mhm.
no, why do I have to do this? And really, and if I say it to do in 2 days, it's due in 2 days. If it's due in 2 hours, it's due in 2 hours. And when you are someone who is in a leadership role in the military, like you make rank. You've been in for a while. Now you're the master sergeant telling people what to do. A lot of the times, the job that you get, even if you manage to get something that's equivalent to your skill and your pay, the job that you get on the outside world doesn't have that same level of authority. So when you say something now, it's more suggestive, it's more collaborative. It loses that will do it because I said so, kind of. Even if you don't say it necessarily that way in the military, right? There isn't a rank on your shoulder and that level of hierarchy that's respected in the civilian world that holds people to that level of doing it and being accountable for it. And that's something that a lot of people struggle with. So even if they find the job, it is just the transition in that role that can be tough to navigate sometimes too. It's the scenario that you're placed in.
Okay, interesting.
So I'll stop there. I'll let you digest that for a second.
What's hitting me is that it sounds kind of similar to if you're an athlete
Huh.
and you're on teams, right? And the teams, there's camaraderie there, there's an immediate connection, there's a shared goal. You have coaching. It's like, you do this at this time, you do this kind of exercise, and it's very, regimented maybe and
Yes,
structured,
yes.
and then you feel like you're part of a family. And then it sounds like, you get out of the military and it's not the same family and it's not the same structure.
Structure is a big piece of it.
Mhm.
When people are used to structure and they move into a space that has no structure, it's like, what do I do? This is crazy. What do you mean there's no TO or technical operating manual that tells you specifically how to do it? Because that's
Mhm.
another thing that's different. In the military, most often your position is impacting something where a person could die if you do
Mhm.
the wrong thing. Your decision and your move, what you push, impacts a really big mission somewhere that could be life or death. And so they teach you to pay attention to that level of detail. And the reason there are so many technical manuals like that that people have to follow to the letter is to ensure everybody does it the same and that you don't make those mistakes. When you get out of the service, there often isn't something like that in place. It's not to say that it doesn't exist. There are some workplaces that are better than others,
Yeah.
but it often doesn't exist or it hasn't been updated. And I know when I got out of the service, I was a Unix system administrator and I got a job at General Motors. And when I got a job at the GM Tech Center in Warren, Michigan, when I got my job at the GM Tech Center on 12 Mile, it I remember I was floored that there were no work instructions on how to upload their computers, how to download the operating system, how to do some of the troubleshooting that they were doing. They were just telling me from their own brain
Hmm.
how they did things. There was no consistency. And because we didn't have something like that, I created my own. I made my own TO, if you will, my technical manual for me to, this is how you do it. And I ended up creating work instructions for myself that I continued to take everywhere I went when I moved to different positions. If it didn't exist, I made my own and eventually started sharing them with people. So then I started becoming the person that would create like this technical work instructions because stuff didn't exist. So structure is definitely a thing that military people lose when they move to the civilian world.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let's get into some of these questions. I know I've been asking questions, but there are some specific questions that we want to cover here. And I told you before we came on, when I read these, I was like completely floored because to me, I always thought that military veterans were a coveted hiring commodity and that companies loved hiring military. And as I'm reading the questions that you put here, I'm realizing it doesn't seem to be the case. And like the civilian employment world doesn't really seem to understand the value of what veterans get in the military. And they don't really seem to know what to do with it when somebody does come out of the military, which is like so wild to me. Okay, so um, question number one, we kind of covered this, but I'm gonna go over it real quick because in case there's something else that you wanted to add to it. The question was when someone leaves the military, whether through retirement, end of service, or resignation, what are some of the key emotional and logical shifts they face? Was there, you had mentioned earlier, identity structure in that. Is there anything else in there that you wanted to cover?
Well, I'm going to talk about my specific situation because I think it highlights to people, even if they think they know something about the military, what's just different circumstances that people could face when they're getting out. So my specific situation, I mentioned I had hoped to stay in the entire 20 plus years and retire. And I opted to get out at the end of my enlistment of 4 years rather than take a remote assignment to Korea because I didn't want to be apart from my son at the time. And so my son was 1 years old, like one and a
Mhm.
half maybe when I got out of the service. And I even though my parents would have been willing to keep him for that year that I was supposed to be there, I didn't want that. I didn't want the separation. So that was a tough decision that I had to make that I could not continue on in the service, but I opted to stay to get out because I wanted to stay with my son. So when I got out of the military, I lived in Colorado Springs. And this is a good question people need to consider. That was not my home base. My home is Michigan. My home is the Metro Detroit area. So even though we moved all over the place, my home base is Metro Detroit. My parents were there. When my dad retired, he retired in Livonia, Redford, Michigan, then Livonia, Michigan. And so you're familiar with that. And I didn't really know anyone, even though I had some friends and coworkers in Colorado. So when I got out, I was moving back to Michigan. So I was PCSing to another state and not just one that was kind of close. It was a 2.5 day drive. So I was actually moving to another state. So I had to worry about my belongings and making sure my stuff was moved to a different area. And I honestly wasn't even thinking about work. I was 22, so I was still very young. I was 22 years old. I was moving back with my parents just to get a starting point. I was divorced. I was a young divorced mom, so I was a single mom. And it was my son. So honestly, at that time, what was going through my head was just getting back home to Michigan and then figuring out what was the next step. And you know what's crazy? Even though I had these skills, that I was a Unix administrator, I knew how to set up this whole network and set up these computers. It didn't even cross my mind to get a job in that area. I just thought I'd apply for jobs in retail or something. And it's because I didn't necessarily know where to begin. I didn't know where to begin or what to do. And it was just easier for me to go back to what you mentioned. I had worked in the mall before. I had had jobs at the mall and department stores. So I knew how to get jobs like that. I didn't know how to market myself or what to do to find other types of jobs. So I didn't for quite a while until I figured it out. So my mind was just about moving back home.
Okay. Wow, that's really interesting. But I guess if you're that age, I mean, if you're going in at 18 and you're getting out at 24, you really don't, and you haven't had to look for a job because you've got one in the military, you just automatically were assigned to stuff. I guess, yeah, you wouldn't know.
Right.
That's kind of fascinating. I never really thought about it that way.
But the thing is, there are people who get out 20 years later who went in when they were 18 or 19, right? This is
Yeah.
their first job and they don't know either, even
Yeah.
though they're
Wow.
not 22 or 24, because they were assigned the job or they
Mhm.
scored for this job. And this is what they wanted to do when they entered the service. And they were able to continue receiving their training because they did the different courses that were required in the different leadership schools that are available in the service. Because you receive that type of training, you get leadership training, you get training on coaching, and then technical skills so that you can continue to be proficient. They received all that training and then would get promotion based on their testing. You have to actually test to get your next rank in the military. It's not just does the boss like me to get your next
Right.
higher job in the service. And so those people also don't know when they were retired how to get a job outside of the service. And I don't think people realize that.
No, that's a great point. That is such a great point. Wow. That leads into the next question, which is how do you help veterans distinguish between having to work and wanting to work? And why does that distinction matter in career planning?
Well, it's very important. So in my scenario, let's 22, single mom, I had to work, right? It's not like I was done. I wasn't ready to retire. I didn't collect a pension from the 4 years that I was in. So I had to work. And it would have been helpful for me if I would have had someone like a career coach come in and have the conversation with me, first to identify the skills that I had utilized while I was in the service, but then also to help me understand where my strengths and weaknesses were so that I could look for jobs that I was best suited for, where I would be the most successful in that role. Because too often what happens is people look at the military resume, or even if they're familiar with it, and think, oh, especially now, project management. This is what your job aligns. You've managed different programs and projects in the service, so this is what it connects to in the civilian world, project management. But the thing is, they're actually two very different things, the way that it's done in the military and the way that it's handled in the civilian world. And two things that stand out for me for project management in particular are people skills. Do you have people skills to coordinate all these people that have to work together to pull a project and get it done? But then also the leading without authority. Many times when you're a program manager or a project manager, you are not the direct manager of the people that are working on the project.
Right.
How do you get people to do things or hold them accountable when you
Mhm.
are not their direct manager? And some people don't have those skills. So I call that out specifically because I do see a lot of people being pushed in that space, and a lot of people don't have that skill. They don't have the skills or they have no desire. They're not interested in it. So why would you push somebody into that role if that's not their strong point? Let's look at what their skills are and help them look at careers that might make better sense for them so that they can actually be successful and enjoy their work. So that's one side, the people that have to work. And I just use project management as an example. Then you have people who have served in the military, they've retired, they're receiving a pension, and depending on their circumstances, they may not have to work because they're receiving their pension. Maybe they have a spouse who is working, and now they're able to look for a job that means something to them,
Hmm.
something that they really want to do, which a lot of people do. They're like, I want to work with people. I want to be a barista. I want to own a coffee place. And so that's a different experience. People that don't have to work, but they want to work. And now they might be able to try something entirely new, but we have to have that conversation to help them understand what does that look like in the civilian workforce. And I find it in particular, it's easy for me to talk about it because I have been in both spaces. I was in the Air Force. I know the verbiage. I'm still in the Air Force as a Air Force spouse. So I've stayed current. I didn't leave it behind in 98. I'm still in the military. I see what's changing. I hear the conversations. I actively engage with service members. I support many of them. And because I had a 25-year, well, a 22 plus career in the civilian sector, I can also help them understand what it looks like when you're outside, like what the hierarchy looks like, the expectations, the words, the verbiage. Sometimes they don't even know what words to use and they don't know how to translate their skills. So it's very important to understand, do they have to have a job? Or are they looking to do something different? And then having a conversation to understand their strengths and weaknesses, but then also their skills to kind of give them options so that they know which path to take.
So you had said that you get in the military, you get leadership
Yes,
training.
yes.
So that doesn't include strengths and weaknesses, and then the military is not using that to put you in a position where you're using your strengths.
So it's interesting. And I can't speak to that 100% because I'm no longer active duty. But from what my husband has told me, they are starting to do more courses related to that, understanding your strengths and weaknesses. So even if you're not necessarily placed in a role that looks at your strengths or utilizes your strengths, they are making use of that type of training to help a person be as successful as they can be in the position that they're currently in.
Okay.
Because when you join the military, two things happen. You're either assigned a job based on how well you did on the ASVAB test. So where you scored high. Did you score high in mechanics? Did you score high on the English side of things, administration? Or did you score high on the general side? And then where there is a need. So they try to put those two together to place you in a spot where you're going to be successful, or you sign up for a guaranteed job and not many people have that. But if you have a good recruiter, you sign up for a guaranteed job, something you've selected, and that's the career that you stay in until you choose to cross train or shift or retire and get out. So
Okay.
it's a good
Okay.
question, though, because I do see the military starting to shift with their training to build
Hmm.
upon things like strengths.
All right. Next question is: what are some common challenges the veterans face when trying to match their military experience to civilian job descriptions?
So I think I might have touched on that a little bit when I was getting very passionate and talking about military and to civilian transitions. But a lot of it is, how do my skills translate? Because some of them don't even realize their skills, honestly, because the way that military does the performance reviews, and they call them EPBs or something like that now, a lot of it is more like a resume. So it's more like the things that you did rather than your skills. And traditionally, a civilian resume at least starts out with some skills that you have, maybe certifications that you have, and then some bullet points on things that you've done and the outcome of that. And the biggest struggle that people have, and like I had, like I said, I didn't even know where to start to get a job as a Unix system administrator, but articulating what your skills are. So first, understanding what the skills are, articulating, knowing and saying them, and then how does that align with the civilian sector? Some of them don't even know how to read a job description for the civilian world because it's so different. And one of the things that I do is help them with that. So me in particular, but that's a challenge that they have is what does this job really want? Uh, Something that I learned is a lot of them misunderstood if they saw a project manager or a program manager or anything that just said manager, they thought that meant a manager role. And that's not always the same,
Yeah.
that it was a
Hmm.
manager and they would be managing people. And they
Hmm.
didn't often realize that it was a program or a project of some sort that they were managing and not people. So it's just a lot of learning. I would say that's the biggest challenge is really trying to understand what are the skills that they're looking for and how can I show that I have them? And how can I show what I did in the military that that is equivalent to the experience in the civilian world? And that was a big frustration for me. That sort of goes back to what you mentioned earlier at the beginning of the episode about people not understanding the value that veterans bring. When
Hmm.
I got out, I had been in 4 years. And I know 4 years isn't anything compared to 20 years, but it wasn't 4 years of college. It was 4 years of work. And it
Hmm.
was 4 years of actually applying my skill set in the work setting. So I went to basic training. I went to technical school, which is for me, I think it might have been a 16-week program where it was every single day for 8 hours where you're learning your skill set. And that varies depending on your AFSC or the code that you are assigned, your work. That varies the length of the school that you go to. And then you receive continued training, like I mentioned. There's different technical levels. So something that the military does is you have to, let's say you started a level 1 and then a level 3. I think it's a level 3 in the Air Force. Now you have to become more proficient and you have to obtain a level 5. And that requires you reading training, looking at training, applying it on the job. Then you have to move on to the next level before you can even be considered to be promoted. Like you have to show you're proficient in your skill and you have to increase in that level each time before you can even be ready for a promotion. So it frustrated me when people wouldn't see that as the same as having, because I didn't have a degree. My 4 years, even though it was work and I was actually receiving technical because I didn't have a degree. Either you didn't get the same type of job or you didn't get the pay. And that
Right.
that is also a challenge that military service members have if they have the time but they don't have a degree. Their
Mhm.
time spent has no value for a lot of organizations because they don't understand how that experience translates. And it's
Yeah,
frustrating.
it's so foolish that, society ended up in that mind frame of going to school and reading a book and talking about, theory or whatever, not always theory, but, doing textbook stuff was more important than doing the actual stuff.
Right. I can't tell you. And I know that people, if anyone listens, can say the same thing. How many people do you know with a degree that know nothing, that are completely useless at their job, that are terrible at their job? And that's not to say that people with degrees are all bad. I mean, I'm getting my master's. I'm getting my master's in applied IO psychology, but I was an equally skilled worker when I came out and just as competent. And yes, I was younger and inexperienced, and there was a lot I had to learn, but I was just as worthy of having the opportunities that other people had, and maybe more so because I had real world application
Yeah,
and not just sitting at class.
right. Hmm. Okay, so how do you guide someone who's unsure what they want to do next, especially if their military role doesn't clearly map to a civilian career?
So, one of the things that I do is there's a tool online. It's called ONET. The Department of Labor created it, I believe.
Does
And
the O stand for Olson?
I think it's occupation. Yeah, I should know what it actually stands for, but it's ONET. And if you go in there, if you look for it online, and it's such a cool tool, and it's really cool for military service members now. I know the last time I looked at it, it was when I was getting my bachelor's degree, and this was a while ago. This was years ago, and it did not have this feature. So one of the reasons I really like it from military to civilian transition is it helps with this process. You're able to actually pull up the tool and put in, I think, what you did as a military service member, and it kind of helps you figure out what that looks like on the civilian world. It actually does the
Hmm.
mapping for you. And so we sit there and we talk through it. But I make them, I shouldn't say I make them, but I have them go through the exercise on
You
their
make them
own.
because you're military.
Yes, yes. For some reason, that creeps up on me. I seem to still carry that with me. People tell me that they can tell I'm a prior military because of my demeanor. I do expect a lot. I have high expectations of myself and other people. I will say that, and I do like structure. Um, but I do like to help people. So ONET is a powerful tool, in my opinion, that I like to use with people. And it just allows you to go up there and look at the different jobs that exist. So you can look at the different jobs that are out there in the civilian world. You can type almost anything. You can click on different jobs. It could be painter, house painter, if it's out there, and find out what are the skills required, what are the tasks, what does someone actually do in this job, what are the abilities, what's some knowledge that you need to in order to do it, and then you can see how that aligns with your expectations, but then also your own skill set. So, for instance, let's say you do want to be a project manager and you go out there and you look at the different skills, and maybe you find out that the one of the most um, used skills, it's 85% up there for all the different tasks that you have to perform, is the ability to influence without authority. And you don't know how to do that, or you say, you know what? I still want to be a project manager. I don't quite know how to do that. Now you have the opportunity to look at what classes can I take? What books can I read so that I can learn that, so that I can obtain that skill, so that I can actually be good in this role or be successful in this role. So one of the reasons that I have people look at ONET is to one, help them see all the different jobs that are out there. It's not just project manager. It's not just painter or logistics or sales person. There's so many different opportunities out there, but also they're able to see how their skills, if you put your skills in there, it can also pull up different jobs that you might be interested in that's not so narrow-minded or just focused in one space. And there's also a test you can take online on using this ONET that helps you figure out where you're best suited, what makes sense for you, the types of jobs.
That's great. Is that something that non-military can use too, or do you need some kind of
Yes.
military
Yes.
credential
In
for
fact, I used it for non-military. And then
that?
as I was exploring um, the other side of hiring successful candidates, like how to find people that are ideal for your jobs, like your job postings when you're
Mhm.
hiring for people, it's you're not hiring, you're selecting people. And knowing that you are looking for people with specific skills. I actually use this tool and have talked about it with people when they're writing their job descriptions and when they're looking for specific candidates. You want to look for
Mhm.
people that possess these skills so that you know they're going to be successful or who can demonstrate that they have these competencies or that they can do these tasks. So absolutely, civilian also, you can go out there. It's like it's such a cool tool and it's really gotten better since they created it.
That sounds awesome. And I love how you said you're not hiring, you're selecting.
Yes, you are.
So
You're
yeah.
selecting that. So many times there's a position open and people are like, five people applied, none of them are the right person. It's like, well, do you want the person to stay? Do you want to select the best candidate? Then you better keep looking. Because some people just, I don't want to say they just settle, but they do
Right.
oftentimes. We need somebody in the
Right.
spot. This is the best option. Well, you keep looking. I keep telling people and my children actually as they're looking for jobs, don't see a rejection as a rejection when you don't get a job. Look at it. It wasn't the best opportunity for you because there was some aspect of it where you wouldn't have been successful.
Or the people don't understand your talent. The
Yes.
hiring people don't understand your talent.
Yes. So you wouldn't want to work there anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So can you share a moment when a veteran you coached found clarity or confidence in their transition and what helps them get there?
I have so many experiences, and I'm trying to think of who's the best one that I could use. So I recently coached a Navy service member. Well, maybe not recently, like 2 years ago, and he was struggling with the whole project management thing because he was told project management is the way to go. So we talked. I actually used ONET, and we talked through what project management looks like. What are the skills that are necessary? We also talked about the working hours because some service members are very used to like a 6:30, 6 to 3 o'clock shift, and that's it. They go home Monday through Friday. Some, not all. And when you get out and you get a corporate job, it's particularly corporate job and project management specifically, you don't always work 40 hours. You
Hmm.
can work way more than 40 hours.
Yeah.
And if you work for a global company, you might be working at 6 o'clock in the morning and then 10 o'clock
Hmm.
at night. A lot of people don't realize that. And because we are becoming more global now, more than ever, many people, your job is like that. So it doesn't just start and end at a certain time. And so when I coached this particular service member, we talked about that. He's, oh, realizing that maybe that's something that he didn't want to do. And so when we had a conversation, we talked about, do you have to work or do you want to work? These are the two
Hmm.
things that we talked about because he was retiring. So he wanted to work. He didn't have to work. He wanted to work. So we were able to sort of navigate that conversation because it was something that he wanted to do and he didn't have to do. So he could be choosy. And
Okay.
that's another thing. Can you be choosy? So we talked through it. He had a couple different options, and I coached him through sort of the pros and cons of both scenarios. They were both project management roles, and he brought to me some of the things that he had learned about each position because he had actually interviewed for both. And so as we were talking through them, he was able to make, I guess maybe based on our discussion, the best choice for himself. And it wasn't necessarily monetary. He wanted the work environment more than he wanted the money. And so for me, I guess it was super cool to see that he was able to stand behind that just based on our conversation. And I had asked him a question. I think the thing that really helped him, and I'm trying to think specifically how I asked it, but I had asked at the end of the day, when you come home, when you walk through the door, this was how he figured out what he wanted to do, like the type of job that he thought he wanted to go for. It's, what do you want to feel when you come through that door? Because that feeling is different for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
What did you leave behind at work? All right. Do you want to have the, oh my gosh, this sucks. I'm so tired. I never want to go back. Or do you want to feel like, oh my gosh, today at work, like Paul figured this out and it was so cool because he's been struggling and whatever it is, right? Or I helped my team and I, we went out for lunch and it was just cool to see that the team getting together and helping each other solve a problem or whatever it is. And when I asked him that question, he said that it really helped him figure out which one of the jobs that he wanted because
Hmm.
the one that he ultimately chose helped support the life that he wanted when he got home, that he could leave the job at the door but still feel good about what he did.
That's a great question. And that whole story is making me think that
Cry? I'm just kidding.
yeah. It's making me think that we could do an episode about um, you know, transitioning military who want to start a business.
Yes.
Obviously the business stuff is stuff that I can talk about, right? And what you're saying there is one of those questions you ask people when they're not sure what kind of business they want to start. You ask them that kind of question. Well, how do you want to feel at the end of the day? you know, so that's great. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, that's all the questions.
Okay.
Um,
That's a wrap then.
awesome. Yeah, gosh, that was great. I mean, what an eye opener. What a total eye opener and cool stories. I mean, you're going to work inside a mountain,
I know.
massive vault doors. How cool is that?
Yes. And that's just one cool story. I'm sure we have more people. We'll definitely bring on some people to talk about that experience in future episodes for sure.
Awesome.
So, yep, that's a wrap.
All
Like,
right. Well,
subscribe.
just for those listening, make sure that you like and subscribe. And when Lori turns on the comments, you can comment.
I will do it, I promise.
Share with us your story. Maybe you have a, transition story that you want to share, or a transition challenge that you want to share. You can post that as well.
Yes, reach out, let us know. Maybe we'll feature you on the podcast.
That's right.